Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the segment of Coach Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day, where we continue with the third passage of the Bani Din Rain in Maj Mahalla Panjwa, and it is recited as under. Sant Aradhan Sadh Sadha, sabna ka baksend, jio pind jini sajya, ਕਰ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਦਿੱਤਿਨ ਜਿੰਦ ਗੁਰ ਸਬਦੀ ਆਰਾਧੀਐ ਜਪੀਏ ਨਰਮਲ ਮੰਤ ਕੀਮਤ ਕਹਿਣ ਨ ਜਾਈਐ ਪਰਮੇਸ਼ਰ ਬੇਅੰਤ ਜਿਸ ਮਨ ਵਸੇ ਨਾਰਾਇਣੋ ਸੋ ਕਹੀਏ ਭਗਵੰਤ जी की लोचा पूरी है मिले स्वामी कंत नानक जीवै जप हरि दुख सबे ही हंत दिन रैण जिस ना विसरै सो हरिया होवै जंत. It's a relatively short passage started by saying Sant Aradhan Sadh Sadha, sabna ka baksend. Sant Aradhan, Sant being referred here to in a plural sense to those who are engaged in Aradhan. The word Aradhan literally being translated as worship, adoration, so we shall call it devotion. Those that are devoted, constantly devoted, Sadh Sadha, to whom sabna ka baksend, the self, who's ever gracious. Baksend, the giver of gifts. Bakshish comes from the Islamic to give a gift, the gift of the Creator to its creation. Jio pind jini sajya kar kirpa ditini jind. So this is the quality that is being mentioned of the self. Jio pind jini sajya, the one who created the body, sajya, and then kar kirpa, in its benevolence, ditin jind, gave it life. It invests the life current in the body after it creates it. It is to that giver, the Baksind, that the Sant are constantly in a state of Aradhan, adoration or devotion. And now the instruction is that this devotion, adoration, should happen through the medium of the Gur, which is a knowledge medium. Gur sabdi aradhiye, Guru Arjan says. So through the testimony, Gur sabdi, as other concepts in Gurbani, has multiple connotations. It of course means sound. It also means the testimony, the word of the enlightener. So here, Gur Sabdi Aradhiya. This Aradhan is done through the testimony of the Gur. You invoke the self through the testimony of the teachings. Japiye, understand, get insight into. Japiye, nirmal mant. Mant, from the word mantra, suggests teachings, because mantras were believed to have powerful messages and had the capacity to influence very powerfully our psychological structure. So therefore here, the pure mantra is the testimony of the Guru. And for us, that comes to engage with Gurbani, with the text of Gurbani. That is the beginning for us. So we get the picture here. The Sant are always engaged, always devoted to the self. Devotion simply means trying to know the self. And the self, of course, is the giver of the body, of the life current. It is best known through the Gur. In fact, it is the only way to know, because it is supra-sensory. No amount of sensory knowledge will get you to the self. And that's what the Guru says here. कीमत कहने ना जाइए परमेश्वर बेअंत. So it is beyond the reach of the senses. So you need specialized ways and knowledge. The reference here is intuition, which is a capacity that we have to learn to develop and trust. जिस मन वसे नारायणो सो कहिए भगवंत. जिस मन वसे, in the mind, where vase, establish itself. In that mind where Narayano, Narayan has established itself, so kahiye Bhagavant. That mind is fortunate. But Bhagavant also means, it comes from Bhagavan, which means that it is full, fulfilled, it is full of knowledge. So, in the mind where Narayano comes from the word Narayan, which means the abode of all living beings. It is the haven in which we are. So the mind in which the knowledge of Narayan comes to establish itself is now completely saturated. Bhagavant, fortunately, saturated. Ji ki locha puriye mile swami kant. So the union with the husband self really is none other than the acquisition of that knowledge. There's no difference between the self and its knowledge. And that's why it leads to ji ki locha puriya. Locha desires, the compulsive push to expand is all fulfilled when this knowledge is acquired. In other words, the mind now is at an elevated consciousness. And the urge of all Bani, there is an urgency to push the mind to get there sooner rather than later. And therefore, Nanak declares in the end that Nanak jiva jap hari, that Nanak lives by the Har self. In other words, Nanak lives with that knowledge, is guided by that knowledge. That knowledge is the compass that Nanak uses, and therefore finds dokha sabe hi hant, all sorrow is destroyed. Din rain jis na visre so harya hove jant. Day and night, who never forgets the Har self is free of sorrow. So the instruction to us is to reach out to the self that has created this body and invested it with the life current. So there is an urgency to know the self, to understand that it is the self that is driving the body and what's in it, rather than the other way around. And the Sant are those who have an elevated level of consciousness, and they are devoted. They are always devoted to reaching this end of self-knowledge. They are lifelong learners, in other words, who are trying to understand and reconcile with the workings of the universe. And they are doing this through a knowledge medium called Satguru. So the question is, why must we evolve our consciousness in this way? The answer, based on Gurmat, is that we need to become co-creators with the Creator by helping along the impulse of evolution. And the impulse of evolution is inherent in what Guru Nanak calls hukam. That is why he says, hukam rajai chalana. You want to be in harmony with this impulse. This impulse is one of evolution, constant expansion and evolution. So that is what we have to do. Din rain jisna visara. So an individual who's constantly engaged in evolving consciousness, din rain jisna visara, through the Satgur, Gur Sabdi-Aradhya, evolves to the level of the Creator. And what does that mean? It means that the mind is then always abloom, sada vigas, always creative and not stagnant. Harya hove jant. And it is in this way that all sorrow is destroyed. Dokh sabbe hi hant. So it becomes clear that the source of our sorrow is, there is a link between where we stand in reference to this impulse called hukam. The less in harmony we are with it, the more sorrow in our lives. The more in harmony that we are with it, the more joy is in our life. So we need to get out of the stagnancy of our conditioned existence, because haume is stagnant. It doesn't grow. It builds walls. That is what we have to do, is break those walls. On that note, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.